Yeah, I think it's very underrated how much duration matters for any kind of thing like this, whether you're a creator, you're running a startup, or maybe both. Just like
Yeah.
doing something for a really long time is really, really important. And yeah, in order to do something for a long time, you have to kind of figure out what you like and what works for you and all that kind of stuff. And that's not to say that you should avoid burnout or avoid doing things you don't like. Like it's weird. And so startups and being a creator or whatever, it's always going to be sort of filled with the ups and downs, and you're going to experience like the full palette of emotions and running your thing as you should. But yeah, what you want to avoid is having it be so overwhelming and so bad for so long that you're like, I'm done, I'm out, you know?
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to another episode of the Refactoring podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview some of the best, most thoughtful and accomplished tech leaders in the world. Today's guest is Dan Schipper. Dan is the CEO and founder of Every, which is one of the world's most popular publications writing about AI and our relationship with technology. And Dan is one of my heroes. His newsletter was the first I ever paid for on Substack and single handedly inspired me to start refactoring. But he doesn't know. I will tell him during the interview and you will see what he says. So, with Dan, we'll talk about the boundaries blurring between product development and content creation, the role of journalists, entrepreneurs, and how his team builds software with AI. And spoiler alert, AI writes 90% of their code. So let's dive right into the action after a short word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, scheme provisioning, and fine-grained authorization. That's where WorkOS comes in, making it fast and painless to add enterprise features to your app. Their APIs are easy to understand, so you can ship quickly and get back to building other features. WorkOS also provides a free user management solution called AuthKit, a complete out-of-the-box user management system that's free for the first million users. It's a drop-in replacement for Auth0 and comes standard with useful features like domain verification, role-based access control, bot protection, and MFA. It's powered by Radix components, which means zero compromises in design. You get limitless customizations as well as modular templates designed for quick integrations. Today, hundreds of the fastest growing startups are powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know, like Cursor, Vercel, and Perplexity. So check it out at workos.com to learn more. That's workos.com. Hey Dan, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So Dan, you are the CEO and founder of Every, which is, how do you even define it? What's your definition of Every?
I've been calling it a multimodal media company. So we publish writing, podcasts, videos, and software.
Okay.
And what we've found is that because of AI, the line between being a builder and being a writer is starting to blur.
Yeah.
Because you can write prompts in English and that makes software. And software is now so cheap to build that
Yeah.
um, it becomes kind of like content. You know, if you release
Yeah.
a new little experiment, people love to interact with it in the way they might want to interact with a tweet or an essay or a video.
Yeah.
And the core of Every is every day we publish a long form essay about what comes next in tech. And we have almost 100,000 subscribers. We've been at it for about 5 years. And what we've noticed over time is that the best way for us to write about what comes next is to be using these tools and these technologies
Yeah.
every single day and building things with them. And when we build with them, we release them to the audience because, as I said, like that's some of our best content is the experiments we make. And
Yeah.
over time, what we've realized is that those experiments can become really great businesses. So what Every is today is we have that core newsletter. We publish
Yeah.
podcasts, we publish videos, we have a YouTube channel, and then we also have a studio, a startup incubation studio, where
Okay.
we have entrepreneurs in residence who build apps. We've so far incubated and released 4 apps, and then we bundle them together. So when you pay for Every, you get access to all of our content, and you get access to all the software that we make all in one.
Okay, and so the studio works that entrepreneurs are owners of the product or they work for every, is that like a hybrid agreement, something like that?
It depends. So sometimes our EIRs are on salary. So we have a few salaried EIRs. One is Danny Aziz, who is the GM of Spiral, which is a marketing automation app that allows you to automate a lot of the repetitive creative work that you do as a creator or a marketer or an agency. Another one is Kieran Klassen, who runs Cora, which is our it's an app that we made that manages your inbox with AI. He's also, he works at
Yeah.
Every. And then sometimes we have EIRs who are just sort of hanging out and writing with us and releasing experiments with us. And they're not on salary and they're just,
Yeah.
we're just sort of collaborating. And so we do both.
Yeah, I love this because I think, I mean, to me, Every is a very peculiar company and a perfect example of this new generation of projects and companies that kind of break barriers between many things. I mean, between product, media, and community, but also when it comes to collaboration between, I mean, regular employees and partners and just collaborators in general. So, but you create flywheels that make all the pieces grow together, basically. So my question is, but how it came to be? I mean, what has been your journey with Every until, I mean, now that is has become this complex and big thing, and maybe also your own journey in tech?
Every started 5 years ago, and it started with I was writing a newsletter called Super Organizers, which was about how the smartest people in the world take notes, organize their notes, organize their thoughts, organize their to-do lists to get
Yeah,
their work done. And I started that because I really wanted to build a tools for thought software company, like a Notion or a Roam type software. And what I wanted to do, I had a lot of product ideas, but what I wanted to do first is do a lot of customer interviews to understand like how smart people were currently solving those problems for themselves. And I needed a way to get smart people to get on the phone with me. So I decided to start a newsletter and say I would interview them for the newsletter. And then they would show me all the ways that they take notes and their to-do lists and their emails and all that kind of stuff. And then I would write the interview up because I love writing, but I would use that to build software that I would then launch to the audience. And so sort of like the intersection of media and software was always there from the very beginning. My background before Every is starting a software company previously. So that's where it started. Every sort of evolved from that newsletter into a larger media business, and the next stage of the business was we decided to be a bundle of newsletters. So it was sort of at the beginning of the creator economy, and everyone was starting a Substack. And we
yeah,
looked around and noticed that like it was great that writers were unbundling, but that they were and had a lot of editorial freedom, and they were making all the money from the audience that they could generate. But it wasn't a great consumer experience because you had to like subscribe to a bunch of different newsletters. And what we wanted to do is build Every into a place where a bunch of internet writers who are focused on business and technology could come together and write together. And so the first like couple years of the business was really about building that place.
yes,
Where we had a bunch of writers together, all publishing together, and there was a lot of different iterations we did in that time. And then over the last year or two, and we were always building like little tools and little pieces of software because like that was just like our again like it's how we made good writing.
yes,
And then over the last couple years, with the AI wave, it started to get easier to build software, and we
yes,
started to do more of these software products that really started to take off. So the first thing that we did is my co-founder Nathan Bechez built Lex, which is an AI document writer, a couple years ago before ChatGPT came out, and that went super viral. And we spun that out, and now that's its own company. And we since then we were always sort of like looking for new things to build, and over time it's sort of like really taken off. I think a big turning point for us was Brandon Gell, who runs our studio, joined probably like 9 months ago or so, and Brandon's just a incredibly talented guy who
yeah,
previously ran a startup called Clyde that he raised like 50 million bucks for and like had 100 employees. So he's amazing, and that really accelerated the pace of
yeah,
our output. And now we have this like really cool like It's still a small team, like it's 10 people, but it's a group of really cool multi-dimensional generalists who are they're all writing, they're all building, and it's just really fun.
Yeah, it's. I love how really the boundaries become less and less clear between engineers, writers, and I love the whole story. And I have to confess, I know a lot of this story because I remember in 2020 I was still co-founder and CTO of my previous startup, but my startup was kind of in trouble. There was COVID. We were negotiating a tough M&A. So I had suddenly more time on my hands, and for the first time in like I think 10 years, I had to think about what's next in my
Hmm.
life, what to do next. And my identity until then was very like tightly coupled to my startup, right? As many founders, and so I started gradually to do more journaling, writing things down, thinking about productivity. And that's when I found super organizers.
That's
And
so
that
funny.
yeah,
Wow.
and that was the very first newsletter I ever paid for. And so I start. Yeah,
Ah,
I mean, really, you can imagine. I mean, how excited and grateful also I am to have this conversation. Because I don't remember the names of the guests, but I remember, I mean, the interview with about Zettelkasten. There was a
mm-hmm.
guest that talked about like pillars of his life, like 7+1, something like that. I mean, this was so helpful for me at that time. And it
Totally.
was also the very first time that I thought, maybe I can, one day I can do this for a living, right? Because there
Oh,
were, I mean, you, Lenny, some of the OGs on Substack that had, in my mind, they had made it, quote unquote. And so I started writing down ideas, and ideas turned into articles in draft. And I launched my newsletter as a side gig in late 2020, like in September. And then, I mean, fast forward 4 years, I really do this full time, like 140,000 readers. I'm happier than I ever been. So, but it all started from there, I mean, that little seed.
ah,
So I'm really excited and grateful, really, to have you here.
honestly, that's awesome. That makes me so happy. You just made my entire day.
I'm so happy. That was the idea. So I'm happy that you say this. So that is to say that you have written, I mean, so much about productivity, systems, our relationship with tech for such a long time. Because I mean, 4 years, 5 years in tech these days, it's like, I mean, an age. But your role and the things that you've done and you're doing have, I guess, they've changed a lot over time, right?
Mm.
From simple newsletter writer to CEO of a 10 people team. So how has your role changed and the way you spend your time changed?
Well, honestly, it's funny because I think there's this like horseshoe thing to like how my role has changed. Where at the very beginning I was just writing, and I was thinking about the business, but I was like a lot of it was me writing, and
Yeah,
then about a year in or so, I sort of switched, and I was like, well, because we raised a little bit of money, we raised like 700K. And I was like, well, I guess I have to be like a real CEO, so I can't write anymore, and I have to hire other people to write. And then the business sort of like flatlined for a couple of years. And then about a year and a half ago now, I made a decision to be like, I'm a writer. Like I want to write. That's a core part of this business to making
yeah,
this work. And so now I spend a lot of time writing. Like this morning, I was on Discord, and we use Discord instead of Slack, and I was on Discord, and I've interacted with people on the team or whatever, but I spent a lot of the time with my phone off, and off Twitter, off email, just writing.
yeah,
And that's expected. Like that's part of my day. And that has actually been very good for the business. I think that like there's a lot of I mentioned Brandon, who's I think one of the big reasons the business has changed significantly. Kate is our editor in chief, and she's the one who makes sure all of the articles go out every day, and makes the editorial organization great. And I think she's another big part of it. We've got a lot of people who have done a great job. But I think for me personally, like making the decision to be a writer was like one of the key kind of like pivotal moments, because it gave me the impetus to like go hire Kate and hire Brandon, and all that kind of stuff, and to really try to flex my own creative vision and creative muscle,
yeah.
to make every a little bit more like the kind of company I wanted to run, instead of like the company I thought I should run. And yeah, so I think my day to day now is I probably spend half my day writing. Like I try to spend before noon, like mostly with my phone off. I'm not
Yeah.
always successful at that, honestly, but like mostly with my phone off. and then half the day doing all the stuff I need to do. So like, meeting with the team and, figuring out strategy decisions and whatever needs to be done. And I really, really like that split. For the last year, I've published every Friday. So that's really nice to have like a deadline. I've
Mm,
not been doing that this month because I'm working on a big long form piece. So
mm.
I'm mostly just like in my little writing hole, like thinking about stuff, which is really fun. But I will get back to a weekly publishing when this is done.
Yeah, I love that, and it resonates a lot. I remember, I think it was maybe some months ago when there was at some point this big wave of YouTubers quitting YouTube
Yeah.
and these big channels. And I remember this video by, I think it was Marques Bonly, who said why these things tend to happen is that many creators start by spending most of their time doing the thing they love the most, which is creating stuff. And then eventually the business, the channels grow and they have to spend more and more time on operations and
Yeah.
things they don't love. And so at some point they just burn out and quit instead of finding a way to delegate more of their time and devoting it back to the thing they originally loved. So
Totally.
I
And
think that's
because I
what you're
think like,
doing.
yeah, like I think like a lot of the startup business advice out there is like totally not right for creators. Like the classical advice is like, especially in startups and software, is okay, like you're the CEO or you're the CTO or whatever, you're co-founders, you're building the first version of the product yourself, and then you're going to hire people to build it once once
Yeah.
you have a little bit of traction, and you're not going to build it anymore. You're just going to think about strategy and fundraising and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the exact opposite in being a creator, or not really the exact opposite, but to be a creator, you start creating, and if you have product market fit with the stuff you're making, you just keep going, and you hire people to do everything else. And
Yes.
that's challenging, right? Like there's a lot of challenging aspects to that. It's not so simple. First, like hiring and managing people, if you're a creative person, is like hard, and that's like a skill that you need to learn, and it is different from actually making stuff you like. And when you have the organization working properly, it's not a distraction if you have people around you that you trust. But before then, it's a huge distraction. You do spend a lot of time doing things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
But I think also people get burned out because like you have to make stuff at a relentless pace, and you have to be like thinking about what do people want versus what do I want to make, and like
Yeah.
there's all these different like sucks for your energy and inspiration and creativity level, and managing all that in a way that allows you to be prolific over a long period of time is challenging.
Yeah. Do you wait? Do you think about what people want to read versus what you like to write? Do you balance between these things, or you care mostly about one of these?
Yes, I do. In particular, especially when I'm like thinking about headlines and tweets and like whatever, I'm really, I think like what I'm mostly doing is following whatever I'm interested in, but then like figuring out what is the nexus between what I'm interested in and what people will click on and what people like want to read or hear about. I think like, but there's always that ratio. There's always that balance, and different people have a different balance. Like some people are all the way over on the like, I only want to make stuff I want to make, and some people are all the way over on the like, I just make stuff that goes viral. Like that's all I care about. I think another thing about me is I can kind of do stuff that is just, because I think it'll work for a little while, but I can't do that for a long time. Like I just
Mm.
get bored, and like I just will stop basically. And so it's been helpful for me to like really try to keep myself centered in what I like and what I care about and what I'm inspired by right now. Try to keep an eye on what's working and try to find the balance, but also what's really, really nice about having an actual organization is that some people want to write the stuff that I don't want to write and just actually
Yes.
genuinely like it. That's been
Yes.
amazing. And I think there's this whole push right now that's like, oh, like brands are dead and like you got to be an individual creator. And I think that's bullshit. And I think in
Mm.
5 years it will be completely different. And I think Every is hopefully like one of the new brands that becomes a place where creative people can come and do their best work. I really think that actual like creative organizations are superior in a lot of ways to individual people just like off on their own, like making videos or writing or whatever. It's really hard. It's really tiring to do that, and it's much better with when you're with people.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's been a lot of conversation lately. And it's the way we think about how teams grow and scale and how you organize responsibilities is kind of changing. I think also the whole founder mode controversy. I don't know if you follow that with
Hmm.
Branch SQ with Airbnb. This whole idea, I think, made me think a lot about what you said. That is, you grow the team also to make the team help you doing the things that you're not the best at doing, which sometimes it goes against a lot of the advice that you get. I mean, I'm former VC-backed founder, and the whole idea is that you delegate more and more. You manage larger teams of people, and what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to realize what are your areas of genius. What you bring to the table, and
Yeah.
stick to that, and don't lose that. Otherwise, you lose purpose yourself, and you're also less effective. So it's not just about managing large organizations. That's not how you win, probably. It's surprisingly closer to sticking to what made you win when you were smaller.
Yeah. I think, there's just a lot of places to go with that. I totally agree with you. I think the best company you're going to build is a company that is a reflection of who you are. You build what you are. And I think people get into a lot of trouble by reading about or taking advice from people who like have their own idea of like how companies should be built and just like
Yeah.
trying to copy that. And sometimes you have to do that a little bit. You have to, you like try stuff when you're a younger founder. Like you try things and you try to, and that's a way of figuring out who you are. Like you don't just like know who you are. You have to like try stuff and
Yes.
be like, this doesn't work for me or this does work for me or whatever. But having in mind both the kind of like best practices and your feet on the ground with like who you are and like what the world is responding to and what it's telling you will help you find a formula or a way of doing business or a way of building a company that is like actually unique and is right for you, which I think is the most important thing for like building a company that actually works. And I think too many people are get too caught up in like what they think they're supposed to do, and that just never, it just doesn't work. And I'm saying this from experience, like I do that too. And I think the reason is like it can be really feel really shameful or embarrassing to be like for me it was embarrassing to be like I just want to write. Like that was really hard to admit because it's so different from what I'm supposed to say. And sometimes it's like you have to admit those things in order to like actually make progress. And it has been it has made a huge difference in my whole life basically to do that in my business, in a way that's actually like I think I'm actually a better CEO because of that. Because before I was writing for half the day, I had to like, I could like grind through problems. And, as a manager, you're always thinking about, do I delegate this or do I micromanage it? And like,
Yes.
if you have all day to do it, you can micromanage to your heart's content. You don't have to find people that can like do stuff on their own. You don't have to empower your people. But if you're writing half the day, like it's absolutely crucial that you have an organization that like can basically just do stuff on their own and is empowered to do that. And I think that's the whole job of a CEO in a lot of ways, or
Yeah.
it's one of the parts of being a really good CEO. And so I think, contrary to my fear, it was actually much better for me to kind of admit what I wanted, even if it was like embarrassing and hard to admit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it resonates with my experience. And I think part of that is also that we are playing long games. I mean, we have to do this for many years, and a key element to being successful. And I think that's true also for people's careers, not just entrepreneurs or CEO. It's being consistent and staying high energy and keeping doing progress on your own growth. And you can only do that when you're kind of comfortable with your own routine, which doesn't wear you down. And
Yeah.
so optimizing for your own comfort because you do the things you like, it's incredibly important because there are I mean, I talk with many content creators, for example, who are just starting, they ask for advice and they obsess over many things like their niche or grinding, creating a lot of content, and they wear themselves down into unsustainable routines because they think about what others think they should do rather than
Yeah.
what they like to do. And there's no way you can last like years doing something that deprives you from joy, right? So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very underrated how much duration matters for any kind of thing like this, whether you're a creator, you're running a startup, or maybe both. Just like
Yeah.
doing something for a really long time is really, really important. And yeah, in order to do something for a long time, you have to kind of figure out what you like and what works for you and all that kind of stuff. And that's not to say that you should avoid burnout or avoid doing things you don't like. Like, it's weird. Sometimes being burned out, like, I sometimes am just like, I fucking don't want to do any work today. You know, I love what I do, but like, I'm still like that sometimes.
Yeah.
And so startups and being a creator or whatever, it's always going to be sort of filled with the ups and downs, and you're going to experience like the full palette of emotions and running your thing as you should. But yeah, what you want to avoid is having it be so overwhelming and so bad for so long that you're like, I'm done, I'm out, you know, and paying attention when it feels like it's getting to that point.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think it's still hard in many areas. We have been talking of creators, entrepreneurs, but you can make similar um, analogies with other parts of the. I mean, for example, this podcast is we host a lot of engineers and managers, and you always hear stories of engineers being promoted into managers and ended up doing things they don't like. You know, because when you look at traditional careers, there are like paths that they seem to be growth paths, but actually put you through completely different things. And you may not like some of these things.
Yeah,
And now there is more awareness. And now, for example, engineers can have a good career even by staying engineers their whole life, but it hasn't been like that. Like in history, just a matter of the last couple of decades. And it's still so in many careers. So I think we are evolving, and these are the good conversations to have, which eventually lead to growth all over the place.
totally.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, of course, about AI because you write about AI all the time. And so when it comes to your work, the way you spend your day and the things you do every day, from writing to operations, what are the areas where AI helps you the most, and how do you use it in practice?
I mean, I use it everywhere. You know, I'm just constantly using O1 and Claude and sort of like the regular sort of general purpose chat models like all the time for, I don't know, reading. You know, if I'm reading, I will just take a picture of what I'm reading and send it to O1 and be like, can you explain? Which is great, makes me way smarter. For writing, you know, just constantly being like, hey, can you help me come up with a metaphor for this? Or like, help me explain this complicated concept that I can't quite put into words? Or like, how would you like continue this essay? You know, where would
Yeah,
you take it? I use it for team stuff. Like, you know, we use Granola to
yeah,
record all of our meetings. So like often if I'm like figuring out like a leadership question or a management question or whatever, I'll just like throw transcripts into Claude and be like, how did I do in this interaction? Like how should I like change how should I like change how I approach the situation or whatever? That's been super helpful. One of my like, because I'm kind of like from the tools for thought world, like one of my most recent obsessions is I use cursor just for like programming, and but I've started to use it recently for notes. So you know, you can throw tons of notes into it, and then have Cursor Composer, which is like an agent. I don't know how much you've used it, but like have Cursor
yeah,
Composer, which is an agent that you usually use for programming. You can like ask it questions, and it will go like research through your notes and like answer
yes,
questions based on your notes. And you can also, because it's used for programming, you can have it build tools for you. So like I built little tools for it to like take one big note and split it into a bunch of smaller atomic notes, or like another tool that hosts my notes on a web page, and then I can like shuffle through them so I can like see random ones, and like maybe that'll like sort of stimulate my curiosity. And
yes,
so it's like this it's this really cool platform where you have this basic agent and access to all these text files, and then the agent can build new tools to make itself more powerful. And it's like exactly what I wanted like 5 years ago, but was like completely not possible. And it's so fun as a tools for thought nerd to like live in this world, because I'm just like, you know, it's like this is my dream. So it's
yeah,
very
it's
cool.
true. Especially for someone who, as you said, I mean, grew up thinking about building tools for thought. This is really a dream come true.
Yeah.
I mean, I can relate myself. I told you in 2020, I started taking productivity and notes more seriously. I created my workspace in Notion with bells and whistles, and now I have this like 4 to 5 years of backlog of projects and journaling, and it's
Mm.
incredible to be able to feed Claude or O1 with this stuff and
Yeah.
letting it find patterns and correlations in your life, finding maybe things that you have said 3 years ago, and you're going through some of the same things.
Totally.
And I think for people who, for example, journal a lot and write down a lot of stuff, that becomes really a superpower and something that money can't buy. So it's a good habit that becomes even more powerful with that.
Agreed. Definitely.
One thing that I noticed by talking with people of all kinds, I mean, from engineers to others, there is sometimes this incredible and inexplicable divide between people who, like you said, use AI all the time, like for everything, right? And to those who don't use it much, really. I
Hmm.
mean, and they even ask you, but what do you use ChatGPT for?
Hmm.
Okay, well, when is it that you use it? So it seems to me that there is like something deeper than just finding use cases. If there are folks who have it like an extension of their brain to folks that don't find it useful for things. So how was it for you? Do you think there is like a mindset shift that at some point makes you think about AI like your peer or your friend, and you rely on it on everything? And if you have to talk with somebody who is not using AI at all, and what they should do to start, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think different people have different reasons for not using it or using it. I think for me, because I'm so into the tools for thought stuff, like when I saw
Yeah,
GPT-3, I was like, holy shit, this is like exactly what I've always wanted.
yeah,
And I think like I'm just a techno curious generalist person that like the fact that now I can code faster and I can make movies and I can like make art and I can
yes,
like write faster, like all that stuff, or I can learn anything I want to learn, like all that stuff. I'm just like, this is what I want. Like that's how I've always wanted to live, and like now I
yeah,
can do even more of it, basically. But a lot of people have a different way of thinking about life and different priorities and different things that are important to them. And so um, sometimes for people it's like, well, everyone else is on the bandwagon, like, but like
yeah,
I don't like being on the bandwagon. So like I want to, and I resonate
mm,
with that. Like I think like I got kind of lucky that I didn't get caught up in the like um uh anti-bandwagon stuff, because
yeah,
I am sort of like that sometimes. I think other people, we do a lot of work with big companies to do like training and adoption for ChatGPT and other tools. I think like 10% of people are kind of like me, like they're kind of the
the
early
early
adopter
adopters.
type
Yeah,
person. And then 10% of the people are like, I don't want to use this at all. And then like 80% are like in the middle where they're like, I have a job. I want to do my job.
yeah,
And if you can show me how to do this in a way that will let me do my work faster, great. But if it doesn't work, I don't want to use it.
yeah,
Which I think is a totally like legit approach to using tools. And it just means that those people are a little bit further behind on the adoption curve. And it just means that the technology has to be like a little bit better for them to want to use it. And I think that'll happen over time. And I think it's already happening. Like the capabilities we have now are like so much better than they were 2 years ago. And in 2 years, like they will be so much better than they are now. Like we're still very, very early. We're in the web 1.0 era, or like maybe
yeah,
even the pre-web era of, like the
yeah,
previous. I think also a lot of those people, like they're always making this choice between, if I'm going to use this for my work, like I can do things the way that I know how to do it and like it'll get done.
yeah,
Or I could take a risk and like spend time on this and
yes,
spend 2 hours, and then I'm like further behind, and I'm already
yes,
swamped with work and I have a family at home and like blah 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 blah. And I think that's all totally reasonable. And I think companies need to do a better job of giving um, employees like time and space where they can sort of risk-free experiment with things, which is
yes,
part of what we help people do when we do consulting for companies. But I would say, like, just in general, it definitely pays to be curious about new things, and there are different stances toward the world. One stance is like, I'll try this, but if it doesn't work once, I will conclude that it sucks.
yeah,
And then and then another stance is like, I'll try this, and like if it doesn't work, like I'll just kind of keep trying and tinkering, and like at
yes,
some point maybe something will work. And I think that that second stance is always going to be a more effective one for new technology, because the it changes very like quite quickly. And so I think having a little bit of that, and having a desire or curiosity to like try different ways that it can apply to your life, whether it's at work or at home or whatever, just be constantly like tinkering. Because like
yes,
the reality is that we actually don't know all the ways that this applies yet, and we can't know.
Yes.
The only way that we can know is to try. And so I think like the more people have access to it and the more people that get to get to use it in whatever way they want is the better for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think that even if that we have just scratched the surface, even at the current state of the technology. I think that even if the models did not improve for like 10 years, we would still keep figuring out new things to do with that. And I agree that, especially for people working in technology, keeping that slice of brain space for curiosity and for working as a generalist on things and trying out and thinking with things has incredible payoff for your growth, both personal and professional. And probably it has always been, but never like at this moment in time. So I agree. So I want to go back to something you mentioned before. You mentioned Cursor, which is of course hot tool for developers right now. So you create products, you incubate products in every. I don't know if you contribute to that, to coding, to the development side, but and you mentioned, sorry, that these tools are sometimes worked on by individual engineers, individual people who are owner of the whole product development of these tools. So
Hmm.
which of course I imagine is heavily like AI assisted. So
Hmm.
I wanted to ask, have you found like novel workflows for working with AI on product development and software development? Have you developed your own processes to do things differently than before it was AI? Not just pure productivity in coding,
Yeah.
but ways of developing the product.
Not really. I mean, like, I think if you look at our products, like,
Hmm.
and you ask the people who are working on them every day, like, I think probably 80 or 90% of the code that gets written is from AI, which is totally new and totally different and crazy. In terms of like stuff that other people aren't doing, I don't think so. Like, I think we're just using AI a lot. There's a lot of cursor and windsurf and throwing things in, like into O1 or O1 Pro and being like, can you like, you know, can you plan this out for me or can you fix this bug or whatever?
Yeah,
And that allows us to go a lot faster and do more with fewer people, which is I think really important for us as a small organization.
yeah,
So that's the so I wish I had more like interesting things. But I think mostly it's all the stuff that you already know. Like we're using Cursor Composer and Windsurf, and like we're using O1 and O1 Pro to like plan or to like if there's a bug we can't figure out, we one shot it in O1 Pro or whatever. But there's nothing radically different about our product development process other
yeah.
than
But
that.
even the first thing you said, that's 80 to 90% of the code is written by AI. Maybe it's trivial to you. I can tell you, for normal engineering teams, it's not trivial at all. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
makes
yeah. Sorry.
yeah.
What I meant, what I meant is like for people who are like AI forward, I think we're just doing all the stuff that you would
It's normal.
expect.
Yeah, the dress.
Um,
Yes.
but like one of the really interesting things is like we have this small organization with a bunch of young products, and everyone in the organization is an AI early adopter. And
Yeah.
so there are no processes to break or no like fiefdoms to
Yes.
like deal with. Like it's just like everyone's just using it, and everyone has their own little domain. Like everyone either owns a product or they're a writer or like whatever. And so there's a lot more freedom to just use these tools as much as possible. And I think the result is that we're just getting a lot more out of them.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess that if that's the breakdown, if really the vast majority of code is written by AI, that means that even when there is an issue, a problem, a bug, you don't fall back to humans fixing things, but you insist on saying AI, please fix this. This
Yeah.
is broken. This doesn't work, and AI
Yeah.
continues writing the code. So the human almost never jumps in to write the code himself.
Totally.
Okay, that's very very interesting. So an obvious
I'll say
follow up.
also just to add on to that last thing is I think in general the code that we're writing, the people who are making the products understand how the code works. So they're making a plan, they're thinking through like how everything fits together.
Yeah.
They're just not typing out all the underlying like functions and whatever.
Yes.
And some of it probably they don't totally understand, but most of it, almost all of it, I think they probably do. And I think that's a bit of a different idea of how coding with these tools works than I think most people have, which is like, oh, I just press a button and it just does everything. And it's like, no,
Yes.
like So for me, like if I'm using Cursor or Windsurf, like sometimes I'm just like making it do shit that I don't understand because like I'm
Yes.
just doing little side projects and prototyping things, and so it doesn't matter how it works underneath.
Yes.
But for production apps, it's still very, very important to like understand how it works underneath because AI does dumb shit sometimes, and so and so finding that balance between like I'm giving it some room to like do its thing, but I also
Yeah.
understand enough about how it's doing it so that I know if it's messing up is I think a really important new skill.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think by looking at the way you work now and trying to forecasting, I mean, projecting this into how many companies might work in the future, do you think what is needed by engineers in terms of skills and attitude changes? So the engineer of the future might look different from what engineers not only do but should be able to do today.
Definitely. I think this has been changing for forever. So like we went from
Mm.
people coding in like really low level language like assembly or whatever to like coding in C and doing
Yes.
memory management to like coding in Python and then now coding in English, and it's all you're just moving up the stack. And so that doesn't mean that in 10 years like we will never go down and look at the Python code or look at the C code. We probably will, but in just very specific circumstances where it really matters.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, like coding, we're moving up an abstraction layer. I have this whole thing I've been talking about and writing about for a long time, which is called, I think we're moving into an allocation economy. It's like we're moving into a world where from a knowledge economy to an allocation economy, where in a knowledge economy, you're compensated based on what you know. In an allocation economy, you're compensated based on how well you can allocate the resources of intelligence. And the
Mm.
skills that are needed in that world are the skills of managers. So it's like knowing how much to delegate, knowing how much to micromanage, like knowing which resource to use for which tool, knowing how long things should take, knowing how to estimate that, knowing like when things are going off the rails, how to get them back on track, all that stuff. I think a lot of programmers are going to be learning those skills too, and needing to use those skills even if they're ICs, and it's not because they're going to be managing people, they're just going to be
Yeah.
managing the AI agent that's doing a lot of the underlying typing. But the typing is like, you know, it used to be hard to like think about how all this stuff works, and now the hard stuff is moving somewhere else. It doesn't mean that nothing is going to be hard anymore and programming is not necessary. It's just like the hard thing becomes different.
Yeah, I love the analogy and the shift to allocation. What do you think? I mean, thinking about the future, what do successful allocators of intelligence need to be able to do? Is it more with respect to today? Thinking about, let's say they are engineers, they should be more generalists. They should probably, I don't know, different attitude. What do you think?
So like I said, I think the biggest thing is that if you look at the skills of managers today,
Yeah,
human managers, knowing how to delegate, knowing how to manage resources, knowing which resources to use for which task, and
yeah,
knowing planning roadmaps, like all that kind of stuff. I think those skills are going to be much more widespread and much more
yes.
important for engineers or for anybody else, because you're going to be using those skills just with models instead of people. But I also think that in general, I think this world is a world that is going to start to reward generalists a lot,
Yeah.
where the boundaries are blurred. Because for me as a generalist, like I can do so much more, right? Like I have 1,000 specialists at my fingertips to like know everything about every specific domain, and so having that full stack sense is like really really helpful, and that's a lot of what the people at Every do is everyone is sort of like that multidimensional creative person, and so that means like inside of Every we have a daily newsletter, we have a weekly podcast, we have 3 software products, and we
Yeah.
have 10 people, and
Yes,
like that's
insane.
that's crazy. Also we have a consultancy. That's crazy. Like you're not supposed to do that.
If you told
And
anyone even like 5 years ago, would be
yeah, and it would be totally impossible 5 years
possible.
ago, like
Yes.
totally impossible. But now, like Danny, who runs Spiral, like he shipped one feature yesterday, and after we're recording this, I'm gonna get on the phone with him to like scope out another feature, and he's probably gonna ship. He's gonna ship at least a demo by the end of the day, and that's totally different. And he's super talented, but like he couldn't have done that a couple years ago. And so I think that changes everything about how you run companies, the funding models, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So thinking about what's coming, what are the things that you're the most excited about? I mean, is there anything that you can't wait to happen AI-wise, because it would be such a massive unlock for your life?
I think the biggest thing right now is just O1 or O3 or DeepSeek or whatever, getting tool use so I can use it inside of Cursor. I
Yeah,
think that that will like change a lot because like Claude is great, but it's just way less smart for coding in my opinion, and it just gets lost in like loops sometimes. And I think I will code much more quickly with O1. So, and I think that'll happen very, very soon. I think that that's one of my big ones. But no, I'm just excited. It's just fun. I'm honestly just excited for all the stuff we're doing and having all that grow and seeing where that goes.
yeah. No, it's the same for me. And do you have any bold predictions about where AI might go, or the impact that it might have on jobs and companies? I mean, mimicking even the famous Peter Thiel's question, are there things you believe about AI that few people would agree with?
I think it'll fundamentally change how we do science. Fundamentally change how we think about where science is valuable and like what science is. So the idea that I think science tries to abstract phenomena into generalized theories where you can say X causes Y. And I think that that type of understanding is quite powerful and helpful. But it has been really ineffective in a lot of domains. So a way to think about this is like what language models do is they predict what word comes next in a sequence.
Yeah.
And so if you think of like a sentence and you try to answer the question scientifically, like what causes the next word to come
Yes.
in a sentence, that's actually very challenging for science to answer, and to answer in an abstract, general way.
Yeah.
And what machine learning does is to find thousands and thousands and thousands of little correlations that
Yes.
together, applied in context, can predict what might come next. And I think it will be surprising how many other situations that we try to apply science, that kind of thinking or that kind of approach to problems is more effective. And if you talk to scientists, they're like, "Well, you don't really understand it. Like that's just correlation. What we want is causation." And
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's correlations all the way down, baby. Like,
Yeah.
fuck causation.
It doesn't matter,
That's
you
my hot
say.
take. Yeah,
Yeah. I love this. So basically, you're saying we may move from this world where we care about in science absolute black or white like causation, where we know for sure about things, to this more fuzzy
yeah,
world where we only have correlations. We don't know exactly how things work. It doesn't matter as long as we know how the results
yeah,
work and that we get there.
yep.
I love this. I love. I'm taking notes because I write newsletter articles, so I take inspiration all the time.
I love it. Well, I'm really glad we got to chat about it, and I'm excited to read what you write.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan, for being on the show. Best of luck for everything you do, and thank
Thank
you
you.
again. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.